Hi, this is Carrie Shell from On Point Quilter. For today's video, I'm going to show you how I redrafted the Tempe Museum quilt using Easy Draw, and this is a tool within Electric. To get started on this block, I first want to bring in an image of one of the blocks so that I have something to help me in my tracing. So I'm going to select a block and then select Import Image for tracing. And I'm going to navigate to the block that I saved here. And I just used my snipping tool to get a copy of the block. Frankly, I couldn't get it quite straight, but this will be close enough to basically work with. So I'm going to select OK, and I'm going to bring it in, and I can see that it's not quite filling the space. So I'm just going to drag my handles out a little bit to try to get that as square as I reasonably can. And I thought if I can get my those corner points to sort of match up with the top and the bottom, that's probably at least something reasonable to work with. I'm going to lighten this a fair amount because I don't want to get too distracted, because my lines are not going to be exactly over the lines, just sort of the reality of working with a real quilt top. So I'm going to move to Easy Draw, and at this point, I don't really even know what size I need to work with, but I can see that I have sort of that square within a square. And so I thought I would start by just trying to draw that piece, connecting those midpoints of the four corners here. And I just did that with my pencil tool. So that was probably the easiest part of this. For the next piece, I'm going to focus on this center. And if I look at this center, I need to understand how many divisions do I have basically along each of these lines here. And so I can see that I have 4 of these flying geese units, another 4, and then each of these squares looks like it's about the size of 2 flying geese, right? So if I count and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so I know this is going to be another 6, 7, so that'd be 12, 13, 14. So it looks like I probably have 14 divisions on that line. Now, if I go and I select my shape tool, again, I'm not quite sure what grid points everything's going to match up with, so I'm probably not going to be able to snap to a grid. But I'm going to select Edit, and ideally I would have a partition for 14, but and it does go up that far, so I can select this and select the partition at 14 and do that along all 4 lines. Now, what I want to do is, on my snapping option, is turn off snap to grid points, and I want to turn on snap to nodes of drawing, because I know for this center here, everything really needs to tie at this point to these particular nodes. So I'm going to first of all draw my outside sort of sashing type of item here, and then the inner sashing here. And this is really breaking my block into smaller units that I can work with. And now one trick is when I want my nodes to also work on these crossings here. Oh, actually, I know what I can do here. I'm going to take each of these lines and do a partition on that for 14 as well. And you can see where now I'm finding places that things are going to be able to connect up. So I'm going to pick up my line tool, and again, now I'm just going to go around and I'm going to connect up all of these nodes for the flying geese units. And because I have snap to node checked, they should all click in place fairly quickly. I don't have to really zoom in. I will find that on occasion I'll miss a node, but I can easily go back and correct that if that's the case. Now, once I have that done, now I need to take my shape tool and I need to divide each of these in half so that I can line up my pointy ends of my flying geese. So if I take these and just split them in half. And once I've got that done, oh, I missed a few there. I'll go and pick up my line tool again, and I will just finish drawing each of the flying geese. Okay, so let's take a look at that on the color tab, and sometimes I will just go and fill everything in. Oh, I can see I forgot something there, so I can go back. That's one thing I sometimes like to, why I like to do the coloring is it can tell me if I sort of missed anything in the process. And we're not done, but I'm going to go ahead and add this to the sketchbook so I don't lose my work so far. For the next part, I need to work on these corners. And that's a little bit more problematic because I want to make sure that I get my flying geese exactly the same height and width of what I was working with before. So, you know, if I'm looking at these snap points here, I'd like to get them to line up with the points that I've already done. And I was struggling a bit with this, and I frankly just started to play with different snap points. And I think I, started at like 9 by 9, knew that wasn't going to work. Went up, and finally I tried 14 by 14 and realized that everything was lining up beautifully. So sometimes when you don't know what it is, what the numbers should be, you can experiment, and it really doesn't take that long to do so. So once I've got that done, I can then take my line tool and I'm going to turn my snap to grid points on. I'm going to keep the snap to nodes also, but I'm going to draw those 4 lines there. And as I'm doing that, one of the things I realized is that rather than 14, because the 14 is only going to give me every other flying goose that is out there, I'm going to go ahead and change that to 28 by 28. Now what I can do is really connect each of, if I do sort of each of those lines going up here, I can create those rows of flying geese. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I can't tell when I looked at the picture of the quilt if there's that line in the green space or not. However, I think from a piecing perspective, it would be easier to have it. So I'm going to go ahead and include that on what I'm doing here. And you can see I'm not exactly matching the drawing, but that is because my drawing is not squares. So once I've got that done, oh, I missed that one there, I'm going to go ahead and basically use the shape tool, select each of the lines, do the edit, and do halves again, which will allow me to connect up the remaining points for my flying geese. And now I will select the line tool, and just like I did in the center, I will do all of these flying geese units. And once I have that done, I can go and I can color. And sometimes what I like to do in this situation is just use the spray can and just get rid of everything that I've done before. So I just selected each of the colors. Now I can pick up my paintbrush tool and I can start to recolor everything again. And I think that is my block, so I'm going to add it to the sketchbook. So now what I want to do is work on the quilt, and I'm going to do a new quilt, a horizontal. And for this, if I look at the layout, it was basically 12 blocks, so it was done 4 by 3. It didn't say the size of the blocks, so I divided everything out and it looked like it was around 21 inches, so I just decided to start with that. There's no borders or there's no binding, so I'm just going to go ahead and change all of that to 0 at this point. And I'm going to take my blocks and I'm going to add those. And I just did a control key and it added everything in. Now I do need to recolor everything. So I'm going to use my actually swap all colors tools, and I'm just going to find some fabrics to play with. So let's replace all the greens, replace the background. For the blue, I think we'll do that. Now, for the red, there was red, there was red in part of the blocks, but it really in 8 of them, it was more of, I decided it was almost closer to like a peach color. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to select the spray can tool, select a red, and for the ones that should be red, I'm just going to select the peach in there. And I think that is done. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to the sketchbook. As you can see by these photos, the EQ rendition is very close to the original quilt in the Tempe Museum. If you would like rotary cutting instructions for the quilt, please check out my related blog post. And thanks so much for watching. I'd also like to encourage you to subscribe to my weekly newsletter at www.onpointquilter.com.